we are fortunate we've been able to, when we first started BLE, there was nothing out there. And so, Robert laughs. We were stumbling our way along. We still are to some extent, but we've been fortunate to be able to come up with materials that we've developed, and we've also been able to use other people's materials that are very good. And there's a lot of good things out there. As a matter of fact, one of them that we're introducing this fall is by Seattle Pacific University. They've been a front runner in the educational sphere of bringing together some really quality video study. And so this is a video-based study. Dave is actually using it in his office right now. And so I'm just going to show you a little bit of a trailer. And what they've done is they span 3 different continents, and they go in and look at what some of these business owners and leaders are tackling in their respective work situations, and have little clips with questions that go along with it. So KSLR Salem Communications has asked me to come in. We're going to start one of these in their office September 10th on Tuesday mornings. And we only have, so the first 4 people that sign up get to be a part of it. It'll be for a 10-week study. So this is a little bit of a trailer to show you a little bit about what it's about here.
All sorts of things happen to you in a startup. And in many of those moments, you think, God, why is this happening?
I take joy in working. I like getting up. I like going into the office.
How do I live out my faith through the work that I do?
We really see ourselves as participating in the work of God. And it's kind of crazy, but as a technology company.
I have to do ministry, so I guess I can't make this into a real business. I was kind of stupid.
We really believe in what we're doing. We're all in now.
I really don't understand why your faith has to be separate.
Faith is something we actually exercise. It's not an abstract concept.
How do you make love visual through work?
And as a Christian entrepreneur, the fact that God seems to be silent all the time, it's hard. We just lost it all.
Had not done anything at all besides surrender.
I made the decision to join Apple, reporting to Steve Jobs.
Figured that later on that night I'd go kill him.
My life is my work, and my work is my life.
And he kept saying, do you trust me?
Chad, come on up. I want to introduce you to a dear friend of mine. This is Chad McNair, so give him a warm welcome this morning. I've looked forward to doing this for some time, and sometimes whenever we plan different events, I kind of think, when can I bring this person into sharing? And so I've looked forward to this. Chad and his family, we've been long-term family friends, and our kids carpooled together, did some sports together. We've done, I think, vacations together, and he's been a real estate client that I've had the privilege of serving. And so I want you to hear parts of the story. There's so much that we're going to just focus on a couple segments of Chad's story. And Chad has a very interesting life in that I think in high school you got your pilot's license. Is that
college?
The college got your pilot's license, and so started flying planes. He's photography. He's done photography work. Civil engineer by training, but he got into these little coffee beans. And so, Chad, I'd like for you to share, how in the world did you go from being a civil engineer into the coffee business? And what got you interested in that?
Well, it was called the oil crash. I lived in my way in Texas. When I graduated from college in '82, there just weren't any jobs anywhere in the country. Sent out probably over 100 resumes, and about 2/3 of those were to Texas firms. I'd never been to Texas before, but that was kind of the only spot in the United States that was still showing a little bit of life. And I'd interviewed with a company out of Houston, Turner, Colley & Braden, a consulting engineering firm, and I'd been working on my pilot's license and transportation engineering courses, and I really wanted to design airports. And so I focused on that company, got a rejection letter from our on-campus interview, and I wrote them back, sent my resume, and said, I really want to go work for your company, and didn't hear back from them. And the night before spring break, I heard these 2 girls at school talking about driving out to Texas. One of them had a sister going to school here at Trinity, and they were going to come lay in the sun for a week. I said, I tell you what, if you let me go with you, I'll do all the driving. So the next night I'm driving through Oklahoma, and it's an enormous Cadillac with 2 girls asleep in the back seat. And I got down here and I had a friend from our church that was going to Trinity, and she loaned me her car, and I drove around to Zachary and Pape Dawson and nothing doing, and I flew midweek over and had a friend over in Houston, and he let me stay at his condo, and I borrowed his wife's car. I called up this guy, Kent Nichols, who had interviewed me on campus. I said, Kent, Chad McNair. And he said, yeah, sorry I didn't get back to you on your letter. I said, Kent, no problem. I've taken my spring break to come and talk to you. I'd like to come in. And he said, well, if you're here in town, come on in. So the next morning I went in, and they'd hired a lot of Illinois graduates over the years. They'd hired 21 engineers the year before, in 1981. And that year they hired 2 people, myself and one other. But I'd never been to Texas before. I didn't know what a jalapeno was. I couldn't pronounce it. Mexican food was Taco Bell. I mean, really, I didn't follow sports.
You're underprivileged.
Yeah. I didn't know what an Aggie was. It was a different world. Anyway, I got a job offer. I was one of the first guys in my class to get an offer, and about 2/3 of my class went on to either graduate school or back home with mom and dad. There just wasn't much going on. 4 years later, I ended up losing my job with everybody else in Houston. But during that time, I started working on my MBA at the University of Houston, and had met this family, the Simpsons in Houston. And Todd Simpson, who was a very inventive guy, had been to South America and seen how they take coffee and they grind it. And they put in basically a bucket and soak it overnight, and then they drain off the elixir into a concentrated coffee. And you put that in the refrigerator. When you want a cup of coffee, you put a shot of that in, and some hot water, and you have kind of an instant gourmet coffee. And that's what's called cold brewing, because you use cold water, room temperature water, to brew the coffee. And what Todd discovered is there's over 1,000 chemical compounds in coffee, a very complex beverage. And when you don't elevate the temperature during the extraction process, you don't extract the fatty acids and oils and the things that cause bitterness in the coffee. So a cold brew coffee is a much smoother cup of coffee. Now, you don't extract as much coffee out of it. You can extract about 50% of coffee if you really push it with pressure and temperature. But in a cold brew, you're going to extract about 18%. In a Mr. Coffee, like or pour over like we're drinking this morning, you're going to be about 23 to 25%. So you're extracting less, but you have a very smooth cup of coffee with a lot less acid. And so doctors would say, hey, don't drink coffee anymore, but if you drink cold brew coffee with so much less acid, about 2/3 less acid, you can drink that. And so he came back and developed, named it after himself, the Toddy Coffee Maker, just a little plastic bucket. Some of you may have seen it. They sell it in gourmet coffee shops, a little plastic bucket, you put coffee in there, a little stopper in the bottom, a Dacron filter, and you soak it overnight and pull that out, glass carafe, and refrigerator, the whole thing. And so I got to know his son, Strother, while I was going to graduate school. And I said, really think this idea is neat, but have you ever thought about bottling the coffee? And he said, yeah, but we don't know how to. And I said, if we give you some space in the back of your warehouse, I'd like to start doing that. So in 1988, with one partner who was a lawyer, I think he put $2,000 into that venture. And I put a year's worth of work, and he thought that was a pretty good trade.
Is this is a lawyer? Is that what I said?
Yeah, I think that's what most lawyers think. And anyway, I did it for a year, and people loved the product, but it just was too early for the market for cold brew coffee. People couldn't get their head around it. Really believed in what I was doing. I didn't have the money and the resources to keep going. And during that time, I got engaged, and I said, well, I better go do something else. And at that time, I'd been doing a prison ministry through First Presbyterian Church over in Houston, and the guy that I'd been doing that with is a guy about my dad's age. And he'd worked for some oil guys. He knew the Saudi royals and a bunch of different people. He would trade equipment. He was in the oil equipment business. And there was a young Dutch guy, 38 years old, Joe van den Nieuwenhausen, who came over and asked Carl to help him buy bankrupt fabrication facilities. And so the first thing Joe did was pay cash for the Warwick Hotel, which at one time was Houston's only 5-star hotel down by Rice University there. And so Carl moved in there, moved into Mecum. Mecum had lost, the old oil tycoon had lost the Warwick Hotel, the Texas Commerce Bank. Everybody lost everything in Houston back in those days. And so Joe came in and bought that and put Carl on the 11th floor in Mecum's old offices overlooking Rice University. And then Carl came to me and said, hey, we've got a task in front of us. We're going to try to buy bankrupt fabrication facilities and start making equipment. So he hired me as an engineer and MBA finance guy to start working and doing due diligence. And we'd go out and look at sites, And over the next 3 years, we spent $21 million and hired 800 people, and we were building hydrocrackers and pressure vessels and heat exchangers and pipeline gate valves. And I would go out and actually run some of these plants when we got them started. I would do the takeoffs for the bidding process. And then in the middle of all that, my wife, who was from a farm in southern Illinois in Edwards County, one of the smallest and poorest counties of Illinois, she didn't have a way to pay for medical school. Her dad had been enlisted in the Navy and said, well, why don't you join the Air Force? So she did that. They paid her way through Baylor, but then they pulled her over here to Wilford Hall at Lackland Air Force Base. And so in the middle of all that, in the middle of my career, I find myself living in San Antonio. So I would commute. And so for about a year, I would come over on the weekends and try to catch her for dinner. She was literally working about 100 hours a week as a resident. She would, every third night she was on call. So that means she'd go in at 6:30, she'd work all day, all night, all day the next day and come home, sleep. For 2 nights she'd sleep at home, and then the next night she did that for weeks, months on end. So if I wanted to see her, I usually had to get Chinese carry-out and take it down. And they didn't even have a break room for the residents. We'd go find an empty hospital room and sit on a bed and have dinner together. So I was commuting back and forth.
And she is worth it, I tell you. I really wanted to get Shelley here, but she's too busy, so I had to settle for Chad.
She was out the door at the same time I was this morning going to work. She still works about 60 or 70 hours a week. Anyway, so I had the shortest commute in Houston. I lived on the 2nd floor of the Warwick and worked on the 11th floor. So it was pretty nice. I could eat in the restaurant and get my shoes polished if I left them outside my door. And so that was, but it got very old living in a hotel like that. After about 11 months, I asked if I could go into sales, and they said, sure, we'll give you everything in Texas except the ship channel, which is about where about 80% of the stuff is. So I drove almost 50,000 miles that year. I really tried to be home when I could, but I'd get in my car and I'd just drive and I'd go and sell, and I actually had a lot of success. And so moved from a junior executive to a sales guy selling equipment that I just barely understood. And but I was having a lot of good success. I kind of have a knack at sales, and so I just I would put in tapes and listen to tapes on psychology of selling and that kind of thing, a lot of secular things, but I also listened to the Bible, and that was a great time. When you drive 50,000 miles in 1 year, you got a lot of windshield time, and that's a great time to just be quiet and be before the Lord and to be thinking. So anyway, Christmas of '92. I'm flying high. It looks like I'm going to make well into 6 figures the next year if I just play golf every day, because it took about 9 months to build most of this stuff. Some of these hydrocraft, if you go down and you see these places like in Three Rivers, these huge plants, those huge towers, that's the kind of stuff we were building. 4-inch wall thicknesses of rolled steel. I mean, this is big, heavy manufacturing stuff. So anyway, was really doing well. I had one of those bag phones. You young people wouldn't understand. And long distance calls were still very expensive, and I didn't want to burden my in-laws. So it was about 10 degrees below zero, and I'm sitting out in my Isuzu Trooper. There was a 4-cylinder running on about 3 cylinders. Anyway, I call into the office and find out that the Dutch guy had lost control to the board, and the board had decided to pull out of the United States, and we were done. So I just lost a year's worth of work and over 6 figures of income. Just went up in smoke with one phone call. Came back to San Antonio, and those of you that were here in January of '93 recognize that as a very poor economic time as well. David Weekley, the home builder, was a good friend of mine from Houston, and I called him up and said, hey, I've always wanted to get into commercial development. I had my professional engineering license, I had an MBA in finance, I had a real estate salesman's license, and I wanted to go into commercial development. I've worked for a lot of developers as an engineer. And he says, yeah, we're going to build maybe a dozen homes over there. I don't know, we got burned so bad in Houston, I just don't think we're going to do much. And that was pretty typical of the kind of interviews I had. And then to boot, Shelley only had a year left in her residency, and I would tell people, after a year, I don't know if I'm going to be here or not. And that's a pretty tough way to go into an interview, to say, hey, I'm available for a year, right? Well, after another failed interview at an insurance company one day, I was driving home, and over in Elm Creek, there was a place called Cafe Maison. Shelley loved coffee, and she, to this day, will drink almost a pot of coffee every morning herself. And if she's usually chronically tired, so she could lay down in a parking lot and fall asleep at any moment. But even drinking that much coffee. So I stopped to get her a pound of coffee and bring it home as a little gift for her. And I saw this frozen coffee drink. So when I shut my operation down in Houston, I said, Strother, here's all my stuff. If you ever want to get into it, have at it. And one of his big customers for the Toddy coffee maker was Barney's Coffee and Tea out of Florida. They were kind of like a mini Starbucks. You know, they had coffee shops that sold that kind of thing. And they had a bunch of customers that wanted this coffee, but they didn't want to make it themselves, couldn't bottle it. And he said, yeah, I know how to do that. So he started it back up about a year after I left. So I go into this coffee shop, I see this frozen coffee drink, I taste it, it says, this tastes like Wendy's Frosty, I don't taste any coffee. Yeah, we don't really like it very much, and we'd like to do something different. And I said, well, there's a better way to do it. And I said, really? Yeah. And I said, well, give me 10 pounds of Costa Rica, and I'll make some product for you, and I'll bring it back. So I did that, and I still had some of my Toddy coffee makers. So that night, I made some in the kitchen, and bottled it up for them, put the sugar and everything with it, and took it back and said, now mix this with some milk, and put it in that granita machine. It's a frozen drink machine. And I'll come back in a couple days. And I did that, and I came back, and they said, man, we love it. Our customers love it. This is exactly what we're looking for. And I said, well, great. It's not hard to make. And they said, well, we don't want to make it. We've got 8 shops around Texas. We want you to make it for us. And I said, no, I got to go find a job. They said, well, we're not going to do it. We really think this is a good idea, and you ought to do it. And so I went home that night, and so here I have a wife that wears a blue uniform every day. She's pregnant with our first kid. This is March, she's due in August. Pregnant with our first kid. We had the furniture we could steal from our parents when we left home. We had the usual $100,000 of debt with a home mortgage and a car loan and student loans, and had all that sitting in front of us. And we had a little bit of money that I'd put away, and both of us had put away into some IRAs. But other than that, we just didn't have much. We had a stipend from the military, a housing stipend, and we had a captain's income, and that was pretty good. And we thought, well, we could go for a while like that. But so I went home and said, honey, I got an idea for a job. Now, I'd had a photography business before and a consulting engineering. I had done some other things. Well, I had a lot of success. And so I said, I got an idea for a new company. I want to get back into the coffee business. And, for the ladies in here, you can understand this. Her reaction was, can't you go find a real job with a real job? And I said, well, honey, I've been trying, but, when I tell them we're only going to be here for a year, and then we're probably going to be in Biloxi, Mississippi, or Minot, North Dakota, it's a little tough, and I'm having a hard time. And that's when I said, listen, and this was really big of me because this is all we had. I said, we'll put $1,000 into this thing, which literally was about all we had. And I'll make a promise to you and the Lord that we're never going to borrow any money for this business. And she said, well, I guess we don't have much to lose. We're probably going to get moved at some point here within the next year. And she said, if that's what you want to do. So I called Strother up and said, would you be my co-packer? Came up with the recipes and formulas and so on, went back to Cafe Maison, and we were in business. And then a few months later, I called on a distributor up in Missouri and sold 5 pallets. A truck will hold about 20 pallets, a semi-truck. So about a quarter truckload to this guy. And I thought, man, I'm in tall cotton. And then a few months later, I sold a whole truckload to Disney World down in Florida. And things started rolling. Well, we're both from Illinois. And we were driving back that summer back to Illinois, and I think it was June or July. And I said, I'm just going to stop and cold call on TCBY, the yogurt company. It used to be a very strong brand. There's still a few around, but their headquarters is in Little Rock. And so I think she sat in the car with the air conditioning running, 8 months pregnant or 7 months pregnant or something like that. And I went in to make a call on these guys, and I made up some coffee for them. And I found out there was 2 guys, Jimmy Wilson and Earl Blood, and I said, hey, I've got an idea for you guys. And they said, well, let's go to the test kitchen. And I said, well, give me some of your golden vanilla yogurt and some milk. And we stirred all that up and made a coffee shake, basically. They said, man, this is delicious. And I said, well, I really think you guys have got a real good shot at it here. And they said, yeah, we like it, but we're just not going to do it. Well, fast forward to Christmas that year, and I called in. Again, you young people won't know what this is, but they used to have tape machines that would tape voicemail for you. You call in and press certain buttons, and it would rewind the tape, and you could listen to your voicemail that way. And so I called in. We were up in Illinois, and I called in for messages. It was Jimmy Wilson. He says, give me a call. So I called Jimmy Wilson, and he said, Chad, how soon can you have 3 flavors of that coffee ready for us? Well, within the next 3 to 4 months, I was in 1,500 locations in 35 countries. And then from there, it just kind of kept building. Now, I never borrowed any money, and I used a co-packer over in Houston. And that grew increasingly challenging because The Simpson family, and I'm still very close with most of them, but the Simpson family really made their money off of oil. And so Mr. Simpson would sit there with D-Base 5, which again, young people wouldn't know that, but that was a precursor to XL. And he would sit there and take all his royalty checks every day and put them in there and make sure that he was getting properly paid. So the kids, Toddy and the silk screening, and they had a weaving company with a bunch of Asian ladies making these expensive throws for the junior league crowd. It was just all lifestyle businesses, so they didn't really have to make money. And eventually there was a real clash because I'm sitting there trying to scrape pennies together, and their approach to business and mine was quite different, and it created some tension. And at one point, they finally said, look, you need to go find someplace else to pack this. And I said, well, there's nobody else in the country that can do this. And they kept pushing. And I finally told Strother one day, okay, I'll start looking around, and he said, I will keep packing for you. I'll start looking around really hard for some place to go do this elsewhere. And about 2 hours later, I get a phone call from his dad, and he says, Chad, I understand we're competitors. And I said, how do you get that, Mr. Simpson? He says, well, I understand you're going to go have your product packed somewhere else, and so if you're doing that, then we're competitors. And I said, well, Strother just told me. He said, I don't care what Strother told you, we're competitors, and we're not going to pack your product anymore. In fact, we're not going to allow you to ship anything out of here until you bring us a check for the entire amount, which, was only about $65,000, but that's more than I had, and or thought I had. So, I went to Shelley, and I said, honey, I got a problem here, and I got all this business and all this going on, and they won't even ship any of my product. I don't have a place to make it. And you can imagine her response. It was kind of like, well, this was your idea. And I said, well, I really don't know what to do.
Good luck.
I really don't know what to do. So, I just scrambled. I got in the Yellow Pages, and again, you young people wouldn't know what those are, but they used to publish these big books with everybody's phone number in there, and I went to the Yellow Pages and started calling Coca-Cola and Big Red and anybody that was in the food and beverage business. Finally got a hold of a place called Amigos over in General McMullen in West Commerce. And they said, yeah, come on in and we can talk. Well, they make salsa and bean dips and that kind of thing. And so I talked to them about taking one of their bean soaking tanks and welding a perforated stainless floor in the thing and using that and I went out and bought pool pumps and so I thought, okay, I can make this work. I don't know how exactly yet, but I think I can make this work. So I called up TCBY and said, Jimmy, we've got a little issue here. And he said, yeah, that's what I understand. And I said, you do? And he said, yeah, the Toddy people were just up here yesterday. And I said, they were. In fact, they've told me that you no longer have a place to pack and that they've offered that same product at a much lower price. And we're ready to move our business to them. And I said, well, Jimmy, I said, here's what's going on, and I think I can make it. And he said, well, I've got 1,500 locations. I can't work on, I think, and maybe. And I said, well, can you give me some time? And he says, how much inventory do you have? And I said, well, none right now. I've got to get over to Houston and get it picked up. And he says, well, you've got to come up with a plan. And I said, okay, well, can I call you back? Yeah, call me back. So, and I'm really struggling now, and I'm really getting upset. And here I've worked all this time, and it's just being ripped out from underneath me. And so I was laying in bed that night, and I talked to Shelley some more about it, and she really wanted me to make the decision on this thing. And I'm laying in bed that night, and I'm thinking, I'm not sleeping, as you can imagine, my blood pressure's going up. And I'm thinking, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get back on my feet. I'm going to go down to Orlando. I'm going to take that business away from Toddy, and I'm going to show them that that is not the way to treat people. And I'm going to build my business up, and I am going to dominate this industry. And I'm going to show them how this works. And I've never heard the Lord speak to me audibly, but that night was as close as it ever came. And it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And what I heard from the Lord say was, Chad, vengeance is mine. If I decide to judge this family, I'll do it in my own time, in my own way, in my own terms. What I want from you is if I do decide to judge them, if I were to burn down their plant, I don't want you to go home and ask Shelley or tell Shelley. I want you to get in your car the moment you hear that there's something that happens to them. I want you to get in your car, drive to Houston and say, I'm here to help build your company back up. And I'm here to help you put you back on your feet. So that's the attitude I want from you. I'll take care of everything else. So I didn't sleep that night. When Shelley woke up around 5, I said, honey, I've got a plan. And so I went down to Charles Schwab and I went to USAA and took out everything we had in our IRAs, literally cashed out completely everything we had in our IRAs, everything we had in our company banking account, and almost everything we had in our personal account. Literally we had $100 left. And I wrote a $63,000 cashier's check, and I rented a U-Haul van and drove over to Houston, and I sat in front of Mr. Simpson and said, here's the check. I think he was shocked that I was able to put it together. And I said, I've got a van here, I'd like to pick up my product. I want to tell you how much I appreciate your family helping me get into business, and I wish you the best, and pray the Lord's blessings on you. And so I loaded up the van and came back and put it in my garage. And by then I'd worked through things with Amigos enough, but I still didn't have a price. And I called up Jimmy Wilson and said, Jimmy, I think I got a plan. And he said, well, what's my price? And I said, well Jimmy, I can't match the price that was given, but here's what I think I can do. I have no idea if I can even make money at this number, but this is what I think I can do, and I'll commit to that, and I'll commit to doing it at that level. And he said, okay, well, give us a couple of days. And I said, a couple of days? My life is on the line right here, And so he said, yeah, give us a couple of days. So I went to work and started putting things together just on faith, and I called back in a couple of days, and he said, Chad, we're going to let you have the business. He said, you got to perform. He said, we see what they're doing. We don't want to do business with a company like that. So from there, it was just constantly, every time I'd get a little extra money, I was using pool filters, and I was going down to Ace Mart and buying stuff. And I'd go home at night and literally wring coffee out of my socks. And it was a mess. I've got scars on my arms and legs from where I've been burned and equipment's fallen over and everything. It was a tough slog. But we just kept putting the money back in. And during that time, we never borrowed any money. We never had any investors. About that same time, I was really struggling because I really wanted a partner in the business. And I'd offered people 50% of the company if they'd just come alongside me, if they would just join me in this thing. And the Lord just kept saying, look, I'm your partner. Let me be your partner. And it was hard. And I said, well, I got to have something. So a friend of mine, Jeff Gately from church at Wayside Chapel, said, well, there's a guy, Larry Amstutz, here in town. He used to work for Pace, and he sells to Amway and some other people. You got to go and see